level. I'm so excited to talk to you. Like, I've wanted to talk to you for like years. You're like, oh God.
Oh, no. Susie, I hope it's not disappointing, honey. I hope I'm on my game today.
No. I think we share a lot in common. And I think we come from similar athletic backgrounds, you know, you were way far ahead in being like a super athlete. So I've been literally watching your podcast, or I've just been like seeing your videos and just seeing what you do, and for years, and you're so inspiring, and you're so curious about the world, and you have just so many amazing you have like a lot of just great thoughts just in general, just about like how to live your life in all the ways. And I kind of wanted to, you know, just talk to you about that. So first of all, this is an interesting little tidbit, is we both went through the Woolsey fires. So I was renting a house on Escondido. So it was like literally up Latigo. Literally went through a crazy situation with the fires. And it was that morning where, I woke up where it was this huge impending doom. Like literally, it was probably 8 a.m. I'm taking my dog out. There's no animals around. And normally there's the bees and the birds, and they're doing their thing. And it's just fireball. And just packed up whatever I could and left. What was the situation for you? And then, lost everything, but it turns out it was one of the best things, and we can come back to that. But what was that experience for you guys? Your husband stayed with Elijah to fight the fires. How did you decide this?
Well, also where we live, even though it's very close to you, the wind is a little more radical. And so 10 years prior, we had a big fire that was saved by the fire department. But since it was isolated to that area, they could get here and take care of it. So Laird, my husband, after that fire, bought a huge pump. And we have a good sized pool, so we had access to water. And he traded a couple surfboards for a suit, a helmet. And
like a firefighter suit.
Yep. It was folded all very neatly, the barter system. And I thought to myself, I've been in a relationship a long time, and I've really learned the value of, keeping it to yourself sometimes. And so the art of like observing and just being like, And so I go in the garage, and there was this big pump and these folded, fire suits. And I thought, oh yeah, the chances of Laird being here. And lo and behold, the fire comes. I wake up in the morning, and Laird has already taken all the water hoses and taped them open onto my railings around my house, and has water going everywhere. He's clogged my drains on my deck so that there's sort of water accumulating. And I was, groggy. I didn't know what was going on. I look out the window. It's this radical black cloud coming. Yep. And so we left and went to a friend's house, but we didn't go down PCH at first, because Laird's like, I'm not going to put you guys. I had, at the time, we had sort of 2 daughters here and 2 visitors. Like, there were some people. And so he goes, we're going to go to our friend's house who has a generator. We're going to let the traffic subside, and then you guys can go. And by then, so let's say that was at 9 a.m., then by 3 p.m.,
the traffic was
when
insane.
The ash started falling, Laird and Elijah went back up to my house, and they stayed there till about 10 o'clock. And I think they fought the fire for about 3 hours, and the pump saved our house. And we have on either side, a little bit further away, 2 neighbors. And I believe it really supported in their houses not burning down as well.
As a wife and a mother, how did you okay that? I mean, you kind of seem like you guys have such an amazing partnership, and it kind of feels like you have the space of being a team, but then you also allow for being individuals. So, I mean, he seems very much his own man. So like, how did you just be like, all right, you got to do what you got to do. And, you respect it, of knowing that he's risking his life. And, I mean, what was that? How did he I have so many questions about this. What
well,
happened?
Okay, so first, Laird's not an accountant for a living, right? So Laird's job is inherently dangerous.
Sure.
So this is a person who has a relationship with sort of assessment and, calculation. And one thing is that people don't realize about either athletes that do dangerous things or military guys. They're actually really systematic and not foolhardy at all. And would be willing to call it and say it's not worth it. The house is going to burn down. It's too dangerous to try to save it. So I think, first of all, that's built in. I know that about Laird. And then the second part, just to even this idea of allowance, right? One could say I probably have a bossy side, and I'm so glad I chose a partner who made it very clear very early in our relationship that like he had a mother and I wasn't her. And so I think there was a really important and powerful lesson that swung both ways. It also encouraged me to, understand what my boundaries were and also that, yes, you're going to be a family and a couple. And then maybe if you have kids, you're going to be all these things, all these, titles, moms and dads and all this. But ultimately you still are your own individual person. And I think it's really good when you're in a partnership where that's understood, because I think it's good for both people.
Totally.
Where, I don't want to be sheriffed. I don't want a dad. I love the idea of a partner or somebody who will protect me or support me and help me. But so I really think that was something that was set pretty early. And that really comes from both of us there's maybe a level of selfishness or kind of self-determination that really weirdly created a pretty healthy dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense because you have to put the oxygen mask on first, before, you can help anybody else. So I feel like it's definitely, I mean, I do think you have to have a certain level of autonomy and a certain level of self. So like in the past, I've learned to not completely merge, where I feel like in the past, it's just, you want to merge, but then, you still have to be an individual. And so, I think that's definitely what I've learned. Okay. So walk me through. So he's getting into these fire suits, and I mean, so he was just using the pool water to hose, like with him and Elijah, they're in these fire suits. And
it's an industrial pump. So it's actually like, it has so much force that at some point after about 45 minutes, Laird had to kind of lean against the house. So you're talking about some pretty good high volume water. And the pool is big enough. It could have, I think they pumped for 3 hours. It could have probably pumped for, 15, 18 hours. There's a lot of water. So, and I wasn't part of it, and which I'm secretly really grateful for. It's like when your kids learn dangerous things,
sure,
but they do it either with a coach or an uncle or somebody else. And then they show you the dangerous thing, but you didn't have to watch the learning of the dangerous thing. And so they came up to the house, and then I took the rest of our family in town, and I saw videos, and that was pretty interesting. But again, and Elijah said, I only thought we were going to have to jump into the swimming pool one time.
Oh my God. This is like a movie.
And what they smelled like was fascinating when they came back. It's like a barbecue on steroids or a bonfire.
Are they worried about their lungs? I mean, I know you guys do a lot of the amount of exercises you guys do underwater in the pool. So I feel like if anyone could afford, I guess, having some damage to the lungs, and, the body is incredible where it can heal itself. So especially if you're eating the right foods. And I imagine all the exercises that you guys have done have probably just rejuvenated, helped.
I think certainly it helps, but that kind of burning. So you have natural matter, which would be okay. But for example, Elijah's lungs got a little bit worked because of some of the trees and the plants, some sort of different oak and different things that he did have a somewhat allergic response to. So Laird was fortunate in that way, but I think anytime you're dealing with burning things, or if there's tire irons, we're in a pretty natural spot. So a lot of it was just kind of trees and things like that. But yeah, it's it's never any good. But I'd say given what they subjected themselves to, they came out pretty unscathed.
That's amazing. That's absolutely incredible. So when you're talking about your partnership, do you guys workshop so I have my best friends, they workshop everything, and I kind of also they're married, and I introduced them, Christy and Robert, and but they're sort of put on this path where they're always, testing each other and curious about the world and testing ideas, and they're constantly workshopping their life. Do you find, I feel that you're similar in that way. Do you guys ever, workshop your life together?
It's an interesting question. It's interesting. I think weirdly, for me, and Laird even more than me is, yes, you want to have some understandings, and you want to stay curious, right? But you also want to have a stillness and a resting in the other. So, ultimately what I think I would like to provide for Laird is a place that is peaceful and resting. And then there's sort of these arms where, I read this, or I was learning this, but not getting overly, I don't want to say analytical with one another, but sometimes, especially now, people are so informed, right? Like talk to a teenager, they have vernacular from therapy that certainly when I grew up, we didn't have, right?
Yep. No.
And so I think sometimes there comes a point where we get too much understanding, and I know it sounds weird, and too analytical versus the feeling, the instincts, the expression, the doing, the living versus, we're going to try this program out. So I think it's maybe more of a blend. And certainly when you step on each other's toes or you go through hard times, you go, okay, well, let's take a look at this. Something in this isn't working. Let's try to unearth that and figure that out. But then other times it's like the last thing you want at times, and we do work together, right? We have a couple companies together. There's a lot of those kind of hard logistics and details, is how do you bring that kind of softness and organic component to the relationship as often as you can.
And do you find that, do you guys trade off on the feminine and masculine? Like sometimes you have to be in your masculine, sometimes you're more in your feminine. It just depends. Are you, or is he seems like a very masculine guy. So, but I mean, do you guys sometimes, there's, I guess everything is polarity in the natural law. So there's, you can sometimes, especially if you're parenting, they say that women can take more of masculine, of being protectors of their kids. So I'm just wondering how that, how do you guys work that dynamic together? Is it just more fluid, or is it just more like feminine and masculine?
I think, it's such a dance, right? Like every couple has these ways that what works for them. And I think because in certain ways, and even I'm much more of an analytical person. Laird is a very feeling person.
Oh, so feminine and masculine.
Yes. So there's parts, right? So there's parts of me that I think are drawn to him because when I go out in the world, or coming from athletics, or being in business, or being 6'3", or whatever the million variables that get into it, I sort of interact with the world from a little bit of a male perspective. And then when it comes to my family and my children, yes, I'm very protective of my girls. They're certainly at an age now where it's not that I worry about them less, but they're really capable, smart people that I always feel protective of, but it's you're putting them differently into the world. Yeah. And then the idea of being able to express the feminine side, the nurturing side, the caring side for my family and for my partner was always really appealing, but it's like having a coach. Once I saw kind of how capable Laird is and how Laird really shows up in the world. And even if like the shit hits the fan, that's somebody you really want in your corner.
I mean, the fire, that's in and of itself. Oh my God.
Well, yeah. And even though like, hey, when it gets hard, Laird's better. Like fire is a really exaggerated thing, but just like, hey, stuff's going on or we're compressed and he gets more solid. So what that does is it creates a trust where I go, I can lean on that guy. I can be in my feminine. I can sort of say like, you worry about it, which was really nice for me. But we joke that, and I see this with a lot of what you would perceive as hypermasculine men. The only way it really works is that they actually have a really developed feminine. And I heard a great quote, to be a true warrior, one must be compassionate. And so I think we've confused, like masculinity has all these traits, but it's also of service, protective, helpful, all these other like kind of really beautiful traits. And my girls and I always say that really the heart of our house, even though I'm kind of the stable through, I'm the mom.
Yeah.
Laird is the heart of our house. He is deeply loving and all these things. So what I would say is we click in and out of roles. On my most masculine moment, I'm certainly not more masculine than him. And maybe that's what I was seeking.
Yeah.
Totally. But he feels it in certain ways deeper and harder, in a different way than I do. So I think it balances, because one without the other or a little of the other, it's not, I don't think it's as good.
Yeah. I think, in the natural law, I think, it's also the law of balance. So you do, I think so, if I'm correct. So it's, you need both. So basically what you're saying is you can't be a warrior without you can't be, I guess, a full warrior without compassion. So, I really like this idea that I heard. I think it was Jordan Peterson, but basically said that when he talks about the meek shall inherit the earth, when he talks about, I guess the translation of meek, actually, the old translation meant that your sword that was sheathed. So it's basically that you had these sheathed swords. So you could use the sword, but you're not using it. So it's like you can be dangerous. You can be a warrior.
You have a sword.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
I think we live in a time where people like to label everything and say, oh, masculine is misogynist and feminine is weak. And I don't know where that started. And I don't find it to be helpful. My experience. I think femininity is one of the most kind of dynamic and strong, calming energies that there are. And I find masculinity to be, it's like this idea we used to tell little boys, like, hey, we don't hit girls, right? Yeah. Why? Because eventually when you grow up, you're bigger, typically stronger, right? Yeah. So I feel like we also have lost the art of getting people to develop both sides, not only within themselves, but also letting young men develop their masculinity in all the great ways, the helpful ways, and not getting them to suppress it, because I think it turns out poorly when they do. And for women to not be worried about developing their feminine, because you're not going to get taken advantage. You're going to choose. Yeah. And you're going to give that trait to who can handle it and, who will take care of it and appreciate it. So my hope is that we don't abandon both and the development of both, again, as individuals housing both energies, but also to the, other biological sexes to go, well, if it interests you and you'd like to develop it, it might not be the worst thing for our world.
Yeah, I think we absolutely need both. And, I think both the masculine or the feminine can be toxic. You have the tyrannical king, or you have the devouring mother. So both are bad, both can be bad. And I've experienced both. And, from I remember growing up, I was like, oh, but I think, I'm kind of really tired of, take down the patriarchy. I'm like, well, the patriarchy isn't actually bad if it's done well, and you need the father, you need the mother. Otherwise we can't exist. And I don't think you can get rid of natural law, and they both have to exist, And so it's like how the world, continues on, and it's, I guess like the cycle of life. And so yeah, I think there's just been a lot of overcorrecting, that I think
and no nuance.
There's no nuance. Everything's binary.
No nuance, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have a whole group of men that are working hard day to night, or they have, shitty jobs, built, dangerous jobs. And I think the idea of all of us kind of correcting things together, and I think that's a harder approach, because victim mentality or black and white. I think the idea of trying to collectively come together, and if there are of people, because of course there are, that abuse power or they're sociopaths and in charge, but otherwise, I really believe. The idea of coming together and celebrating like all the different ways and types.
Yeah. I mean, I totally believe that we're human consciousness here to understand ourselves. We're just each like a form of God, or like the expression of God in these human bodies, trying to fully understand. And some people have everyone has free will. And so they can make terrible choices, and then they'll have to, my belief is that they'll come back and have to learn it all again, be like, well, shit, that didn't work, and then have to, let's say they played the tyrannical king, and then they were like, oh, let me be the devouring mother. And then you're like, that didn't work either. And then you have to just, continue to refine and make better choices. And, we all have like dark and light, and we can all we're capable of the Holocaust, but we're also capable of the most extraordinary things, and do wonderful things in the world. So what do you think the secret is to having a successful relationship? Like, you guys seem to have a really great dynamic together, and you've built a really successful relationship for so long. What do you think those key ingredients are?
So I can say from my personal experience, right? Because I have friends that have relationships and they work for them, and those wouldn't be the dynamics that would work maybe for myself. So, just from like a really simplistic layer, what I always say is it's like your 3 to 5 non-negotiables. Really understand what those are and why. And if they also are rooted from a healthy place, or as healthy as we can be at that time in our life, right? Like, is it a response? Is it, is it insecure attachment? Like, can you really base them on things that they feel solid and good and part of growth? And kind of the rest ends up being a lot of fluff. And I think it's because we think we're going to meet a partner who, and I put it in quotes, completes us. They're going to make us feel all the things that we've been looking to feel that we're not feeling, whatever that is. What I know it is to be true for me personally is that it definitely starts with me. And am I able to live in a way that I feel some kind of satisfaction? Doesn't mean bliss every moment, happiness, ha ha ha. Doesn't mean that. It means like I'm here with a purpose, and I'm sort of doing the things that make me feel satisfied. And because you will never get that from a partner. The best partner in the world is still not going to give you that. And that could be, for me, like, it's connected to, yes, my work and my contribution. Like, we're all here to contribute. And that could be just in our own homes, and that's perfect. But we're here to contribute and to learn and to know ourselves and to mend the wounds that we were given, the homework we were given when we were young, and to get maybe out of those stories. And maybe the idea of someone to be excited about. I always tell my daughters, listen, these are dynamic young women. You probably could find someone who's excited by you or interested in you. What I would encourage you to do is actually to look for someone that excites you. Yeah. Because that's all you can be in charge of, right? Like, I can't be in charge of Laird. but I can be in charge of all the things I feel about him. And then once I'm there, it's like I came with the attitude of, how can I make your life better?
Mm-hmm.
How can I be of service to you?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully this person that you're choosing is on the same page. But we're not going to make anybody do anything. And learn. Like, you're going to blow it. We've almost been divorced a couple times. Can you communicate your way through it? Are you attracted to one another? I think that not every couple needs that. In my relationship, I really, that felt important, to be excited by and attracted to the person that I'm with. And I always say we're really different, but our values are very, very similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. How did you work through?
And good fortune. Listen, let's not kid ourselves. I'm not that smart. Like, I'm really fortunate I met Laird, and it's out of my hands kind of thing.
How did you guys work through almost getting divorced? And what were the issues, and how did you overcome them?
Oh my goodness. Well,
I like to go deep. I'm like, as deep as you want, and whatever if you want to share.
I met Laird at 25, mm-hmm. and I hadn't had great examples around me. I knew I loved Laird almost instantly, like within days of knowing him. It was the first time I had felt like that, and I thought, oh, this is different. I wasn't looking, certainly at 25, I'm not looking for a forever relationship. But I didn't know about even like healthy conflict. So, loving someone isn't saying anything. Well, you do that for 5 years, and then you're like, yeah, F off. Like, this isn't working. And so Laird is a really intense person with intense moods. And I found myself resenting that. And rather than saying, hey, like, can you do something about that? Or can we talk about this? I just was quiet, and then one day left. Because I think 30 for women is a very interesting, and it could be 28, it could be 32. Sure. I'm just saying around 30, I feel women kind of go, wait, they get their voice. Yep. I think maybe you stand up for yourself a little more. And long story short, I left, and Laird was trying to work it out with me. And that's too much intimacy for me. I was like,
were you avoidant?
I'm scared. Yeah. I mean, listen, when I was a small kid, my mom took a hiatus from parenting when I was 2 till I was 7. My dad died when I was 5. In certain ways, it makes sense, right? So it was like, oh, this is so emotional and intimate. And I was scared.
Wow.
And so Laird was the one first of all, he, swallowed his pride. We saw each other, and I said this, and this, and he goes, yeah, but why didn't you say anything? And I was like, oh yeah. I
didn't know I could. I didn't know I could be heard. Normally is the thing.
And also realizing it's all risk. To love, to have kids, to go for something. Mm-hmm. It's all risk.
All of it.
Great.
This is literally what the podcast is about. It's like, to be great. Like, there's so many risks involved, and you have to go for broke in anything to be the best athlete, to be the best actor, to have a great podcast. It is, you have to also have really daring conversations and talk about like what, everyone wants to hear and talk about what, sometimes the private conversations that you have with your friends, it's like, oh my God, you'll see a conversation with Theo Von and a fighter, and they're just getting it, and they're crying, and they're having the nitty gritty of like some terrible shit that went down. And you're like, this is the real shit.
Yeah. And so I think I decided it was important to work through it. And I also promised myself I would never put myself in any situation that I wouldn't say anything. And then at another point, a few years later, maybe 5 years later, give or take, Laird decided to stop drinking alcohol because it really was not of service. And so I think that was kind of the next sort of in our marriage. And that was about 17 years ago. So, we had kind of 12 years of foot stomping and kind of, oh, sorry. And, circling around each other, trying to, renew trust and kind of go through things. And I would say that for the last 17 years, you get better when you say, okay, I'm going to be in this. I'm going to be in this with the attitude of solving things. Mm-hmm. I am going to stand up for myself. I'm going to be willing to be vulnerable and say what I'm feeling, what I want, what I need. And Laird is a great teacher. I'll give you one small example. I have a stepdaughter. Laird came, my oldest daughter, her mother's a great mother, involved. But when I met her at about 4 or 5 months old. It was a very wild situation. Anyway, she was about 3. I was the liaison between the two of them. I would get Bella, my daughter, pick her up, drop her off. Okay. We were all 3, Laird and I and Bella, 3-year-old, my daughter, taking a shower. And I looked down at her face and she looked like her mom. And something happened in me. I felt really weird and jealous. And then I felt really bad because it's an innocent kid, right? So I get out of the shower, I'm drying off, and Laird's pretty, he's on it. He goes, "What's going on? What's up?" And I was like, "I'm a terrible person." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I go, "I feel jealousy and this weirdness to a 3-year-old. And my responsibility is like, I'm her other caregiver." And he just looked at me, he goes, "Seems pretty natural."
Yeah.
And just having the opportunity to express it, of course, it went away like smoke. And, but it's just those moments to give each other the space to say, may not be great, but this is what I'm feeling. And the other person can go, okay, and teach you that safety. And this is the person who taught me that. Or to apologize. I didn't have to be right. I could apologize and not get punished. And that was also really helpful.
Wow. So there was always like a place where you guys could contend with each other and like talk it out, and that's like actually really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And ugly. But this is somebody who like, yeah, no problem. Like, yeah. Okay.
That's amazing. What are your non-negotiables that you were saying earlier?
I mean, listen, for me, and I know this is not everybody's thing. I probably have to be with someone, and not physically strong, but strong, because that brings out a better side in me. Because
you feel
if
safe.
You're not going to do that, I'm going to do it, and then that's not the best me. That's better in another place. I think somebody, and Laird takes us to a whole other level. Honesty is important to me. The notion of moving, what I've learned is that real strength, true strength, like people who are like, "I'm a badass." These are usually very loving people and who would lead with love. And so what I've learned is I really do want to be with somebody who, it may not be that obvious, but if you knew them just a little bit, you'd see that actually they're leading with love. That has shown up to be really important. And then, listen, lifestyle. This is what we do. It's like some form of it. You don't have to do it like me exactly. In fact, he's way more strict than me in so many ways. So in other words, I don't have to do it like him, but just some kind of congruency on like, we're trying to be pretty healthy. It feels like a priority in the house. And maybe somebody who's curious.
Yeah.
I think the curiosity for me, and then the rest is, because in curiosity for me equates to a type of intelligence and
probably
the possibility to grow.
Too, right? Like play.
So,
yeah. And what are your shared values that is that kind of one of the same? Of like non-negotiables and shared values, like health, like obviously you guys bond over that. You built a company, XPT. Like, I mean, you guys are doing underwater exercises of holding your breath and doing weights, like in the bottom of a pool. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, that's like maybe the physical manifestation of the values. Maybe I grew up in the Caribbean, Laird grew up in Hawaii. So there's a different kind of primary beginning of our values, which is, for example, both of us grew up in a way of like, you weren't trying to be anyone. No one, that never occurred to either one of us. You were just living, right? So it was about relationships. It was like Laird says in Hawaii, people don't care who you are. They care how you are. So I think fundamentally starting there for both of us, that has been something that we're really in lockstep with one another, which is, we're all here the same. We're just all here doing different things. And our values about money, about this idea of something larger than yourself, acknowledging in your daily life that there's obviously something much greater going on than, just us. And living, with that lens. And then, yes, I think by nature, you'd be getting to bed early because you're trying to be healthy. There's certain things that we do harmoniously that we would do if we were not together, that we share. So again, trying to take care of yourself, but not, you don't have to be crazy, but just, you would do that if the other person wasn't around.
Got it. Yeah. And how do you guys stay in the mindset of a flow state of building companies and keeping your body healthy, having a great relationship, being a great mom? It's all these, it's a balancing act of so many things. And I feel from what I can tell, even though it probably doesn't always feel that way, from what I can tell, I feel like you do it really well, which is why I wanted to talk to you. Because I'm I want to know, you seem to do these things really well. And I feel like it's the athlete mentality that you have. I know Bodie Miller, who, I grew up with and I know, and haven't seen him in a minute, but it's sort of putting that same sort of, trying to do everything great. That's sort of I'm going to be a great husband and I'm going to, I'm going to be a great dad. And so I think, and a great ski racer. But I feel like I've tried to embody those things as well. And I feel like that's, when I see you, I feel like that's something that you do very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So let me preface by saying I'm unsure every single day. Okay.
Of course, as we all are. You never feel like you're there.
No. And here's what I know. It starts with your willingness to show up. First and foremost, I'm going to show up. And I'm not going to phone any of it in.
Yeah.
I'm really going to show up. And I'm okay with it's hard. I've been in it's hard enough. And that does come, athletics certainly helped. But as the female, let's just say, to start, especially if one considers they would like to have children, doesn't matter if you do or not. I'm just saying if that's part of the formula, you sort of can have everything. You just can't have everything all the time at one time. And so we spent a lot of time going it's not fair and I want it all. Well, when you raise kids, one of the things you end up saying a lot to them is hey, you got to make choices, right? Do you want the cake or you want the ice cream? Do you want the blue one or the red one? So it's so funny to me that then we become adults and we're I want it all. It's yeah, that's kind of not how it works. And so for me, it's systematizing, where am I at? So when I was really young, it's hey, this is the time to play volleyball. This is what I'm doing. And then when I was sort of thinking I was becoming finished with that, I had a conversation with Laird, would you want to consider having more children? Okay. That was the time based on my age and such. And so, and then companies were born organically. It's hey, this thing has a little bit of Laird Superfood. Okay, it has a little bit of momentum. Guess what? We might want to put some gas on that fire right now. So it's also reading the terrain as you're going and even noticing hey, we haven't snuck away. It feels important. Understanding intuitively what needs what when. And your kids are always a priority, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a, kind of a way and a place. And so I think one way I've approached it, people used to talk about buckets. And then I read a book that changed it to the flywheel. And I think I approach it that way. So if my work, which I'm excited about, energizes me and I'm healthy and I'm energized, then I bring that into my relationship and I bring that into as a parent. Is it all even and equal? It isn't. But you just try to pay attention to what seems to be the most important. So certainly when my kids were little, it was I wasn't going to forego being away a ton and miss that. But now listen, I have my youngest kid's a senior. I'm already gearing up on all the ways that I can work more and be more busy because, they're developing their own lives. So what I would say to people is don't try to bite it off and chew it all at the same time. what needs to happen right now, and keep paying attention. Is my relationship in check? How about my health?
Mm-hmm.
How about that? And then your businesses, it's like, hey, it might be one of those weeks where my family, they're not going to get as much of me, and my business is going to get a lot of me, and that's what it's going to take. But as long as that doesn't overtake, I think it's okay. But it's sort of discipline of thinking and of emotions also. You really can get overwhelmed. One little thing I will tell you that helps me is I write my months down.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I see them as a flow chart. People have everything on their phones. They can see it, but you can't really see it. So if stuff starts to get too stacked up and weird and thick, I start to notice that and go, hey, you better lighten up that next day after those 3 crazy days, because you got to be around. The other thing I do is I take a day, and if I have a ton of stuff to do that day, I take a snapshot at it horizontally so I understand what's going to happen. And then I flip it, and I have only one thing coming at me at a time or two. So I don't feel like a constant. Yep.
Yeah. You don't feel because like it's raining, responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's 8 a.m., why am I going to be stressing out about 3 p.m.? Am I prepared? Mm-hmm. Am I organized in that way? So that's the other thing, is doing your work and being prepared. Yeah. And if I'm not, I can't do anything about that right now. So I'm not going to stress out about it. So that has been something that has really, really been supportive.
And do you think being an athlete, so I want to talk a little bit about that. So you went to the Olympics, right?
I only played professionally.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So you were top volleyball player, and how did that come about? Did you intend? Is this something that you wanted to? I mean, when you're like playing in high school, we were like and then you just happened to be really good. So this was not even. Because normally, like, I was a tennis player, so it's sort of like that's like what you do, and it's like you play 8 hours a day, and you move to a tennis academy, and it was a wild life, and so tell me about that experience for you. So like that wasn't even in your mind being a professional.
No, I mean, listen, so I grew up in St. Thomas. I got moved to St. Petersburg, Florida when I was a junior in high school. I was 6'3" at 15. And I played a little bit of volleyball, nothing crazy. I went to a really small school. They don't have athletes, girls 6'3", because if you went to a bigger school to try to get recruited. There I had some great, I had a okay volleyball coach. I had a great basketball coach. And then I started getting invited to camps. And literally kind of by surprise for me, I went to college on an athletic scholarship, and I had a great college career at Florida State. Then when I finished college, I ended up moving to Miami because I had been living in New York modeling. I did not want to live in New York City full time. And since I was now done with playing ball in college, I thought, I'll just move to Miami. I can work out of there and at least be in a warm place. I picked up the beach game. And then about a year and a half after that, a girl that I was playing doubles with said, you really should move to California and try to pursue this. And so, lucky I don't know what it takes. And so I was like, okay. And because I was working in fashion, I could kind of take my job on the road.
Right.
And so I did, and kind of the rest worked out for me in a real way. So I would love to say it was by design.
Wow.
Part of why I think I did it, though, is because nobody forced me. It was really my own pursuit and my own love for learning and growing. Yeah. And I had very good coaches, so they made my love for the game greater. But also, I will say this, and I try to remind myself of this as a parent. I do believe in my heart that we all have a path.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. And
if we pay attention and we listen to those whispers and those voices and we follow those calls and that meeting and that one, whatever, that we'll get there. And so it's very unlikely, the path I took, very, compared to where I was. And so I think that's one of the exciting things in life, is that we have a whole thing waiting for us if we're willing to follow our hearts and bust our ass and, go through the door when it opens.
That is such a unique perspective. I know Bodhi had also a similar perspective, which, he was or actually Marty Fish too, who I also grew up with, who was on the podcast, but sort of like, they weren't really pushed into it. It was just sort of the love of the game. And, there wasn't anyone behind them, where I feel like the rest of us felt like this immense pressure from parents, or from just, I don't know, the sense of like needing to win, like to turn yourself into a superhero for validation of like being loved, like as a survival of like, I'm finally going to get attention. So that was sort of both my parents have passed now, but I think for me, it was the only way that I'm either like the problem child, and I realize I'm like, well, I don't like this, like, getting attention in this, getting sent to the principal's office. So I was like, well, my mom put me in tennis lessons, and then I sort of just like turned that into something that became really helpful for my life in a myriad of ways. But then because it was based on getting like attention or love or validation, then, you have to unpack all that. And I had like a sports psychologist and definitely had to unpack all of that with like my sports psychologist of, it's like, oh, like dad doesn't love me. Like that was sort of, and that's comes from his own trauma. And that's like that's a whole other thing of like him being in a concentration camp as a child, or like that in World War II. So there was so much to unpack there. I think it was actually a collective farm, to be accurate, but it's like a form of, it was pretty crazy. But, so I think that that's a unique perspective, and like really lucky that you got to just enjoy, volleyball for exactly, it was just like hitting the ball over a net. That's literally what it is. And then, the love of the game. And
it was survival, right? Like that was one of my tickets out. That's how I went to college. So the good news about that was there was no safety net. You can be really good when there's no safety net.
Wow. You had to burn, the bridge, the boats were burned. So this was the only way out.
So your focus is pretty good. And so I think I had that going for me. That's why when people talk about success, I'm like, well, how do we define success? And I often think that most people are good at their sport. I know a few that aren't, for a lot of reasons other than like you were the right build and you enjoyed the game and I think a lot of us have something, some little something to prove, fear, whatever it is, like you're saying, getting positive attention, confirmation. I think when people are really genuinely emotionally pretty dialed in, they're usually not great at something like that.
Yeah. No, you have to, as Marty Fish said, you have to be a savage, And so it's sort of like, and it does, there's so many things that I've learned in tennis, was being able to stand up for myself and, have that competitive edge and, deal with bullying and have to, deal, like just be mentally so strong,
Yeah. And they cheat in tennis. They worse than any sport I've ever seen.
So this was something that I had to learn, and I'll never forget it, because I feel it was setting boundaries. I remember, we'd have to deal with cheaters, and so I had may he rest in peace, but there was a coach, Michael Daly. Shout out to Mike Daly. I remember he was a wild, crazy, I think he was Irish. He was an Irishman. And I was 12, and he would kind of scream at us sometimes, be like, hit the fucking ball. Like he was a wild character. And he wasn't my coach, but occasionally like he would kind of like step in, or, he knew that I was a little bit more sensitive. So I think he was like, I'm not going to be like a crazy like Irishman. I'm going to reel it back a little bit. But I remember when we were doing a clinic, and he's like, okay, when someone cheats you, you cheat them back. And I'm like, that's not what I was taught. It was like kind of like the Lion King. Like it was sort of like antithesis of like Mufasa and the, like I feel like the golden rule and, you know, all these things that I grew up with. And what he was saying was, no, you let them know that you're cheating. Like you say, you catch the ball in the middle of the court and you go out, and we can do this all day if you're gonna pull this. Yep. And I remember like and then go get a line judge. And so that's actually like, there was one girl, she cheated everybody. And I just remember her parents were there, and I think she was just probably dealing with so much pressure. Her dad was just very overzealous, and you know, you could feel this. And she was one of the top players, but everyone knew that she's a cheater. So I remember just catching the ball, like, you know, she called it. It was probably like this far in, and I was like, so the next shot, it literally like the ball landed in the middle of the court. I went out, and her parents were, you know, up in arms. And I remember being 14 and feeling like, you know, having to not only just deal with the opponent who's doing what she's doing, but then having to deal with the parents who aren't being like, hey, you know, maybe my kid shouldn't do this, you know, being like, this is not, people aren't going to want to play with you if you're cheating. Like, you know, so it's like, I feel like the game of life is to build relationships and to play the long game. You know, I think there's like a series of games, and you want to play like the long game of all the games versus just like, and I was interestingly enough dealing with a situation where it was like the people, that I was dealing with weren't seeing the long-term, like, you know, like they want, it was sort of like a means to an end, you know, in winning versus, and the way they went about it wasn't great. But I feel like, you know, life is the long game, you know?
Well, I pursue, that's funny because I always say I only play the long game in everything, in my business, in my relationships, in my physical training. Because I've seen a lot of people win in a few short games, but I liken it to having a beautiful meal. And then, you know, right at the end, whatever the end is, you know, like a piece of like shit that you eat right at the end. It's like, you know, for me, okay, you won from, you know, for 3 years or 5 years, or you were in that relationship for a few years. But like, how's the whole story?
Yeah.
And I'm so interested in seeing what it's like if you pursue with kind of the best intentions and whatever best strategies that you have at that time, with the idea of the long game, like how it works out. Oh, I don't know yet. We'll see. And people have to remember, it's slower, it's quieter. Yeah. It's not as sexy.
No,
it's a lot of things, but it's built on this solid foundation that doesn't just get, you know, taken away from you in a moment's notice. So that I find really appealing. Yeah.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that has been kind of the motto for my life. You know, and I have some of the greatest relationships and friendships with, you know, we're building a business in production company with my two best friends, and, you know, and we've had to definitely like test the relationship and move through things kind of like, you know, of like a friend breakup or like a friend divorce, you know, and we've had to move through those things, have those hard conversations. And it's, you know, what's interesting about when you test the relationship and go through those things together, it does fuse the bond even more when you go through, you know, deaths of parents or crazy things like the fire, and it just continues to strengthen that bond. Do you find that, you know, those trials and tribulations have strengthened your relationship with your hubby?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, I'm never looking for it. And I'm always trying to simplify my life and avoid, like, I don't need the universe to, you know, slap me in the head to remind me certain things. So I'm very compliant to the universe's laws. However, things happen. Yeah. And so when they do, I'm not only like okay with it, but you always know that you come out better and different at the other side of it.
Totally. And what were, you spoke earlier about the whispers that God, whatever your version is, if it's the universe, you know, Mama Earth, or God, like whatever your term is for like the divine. What were those whispers that you're like, wow, like I couldn't, like I've had so many of those, you know, when I'm not say like a religious person, but I'm definitely incredibly spiritual, and you know, I've been meditating since I was 12 and talking to God. And what I've noticed is that, you know, now I've been like meditating before I go to bed every single night, and trying to like talk to God. And what I notice is that when God gives me advice or gives me like, hey, this is what's going to happen, you know, like God told me to move, like, this is crazy, but God told me to move from the fires. God was like, I just moved into this place I was renting in Malibu, and God was like, you need to move. Like something bad's going to happen. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, I don't believe it. And God's like, all right, fuck around and find out. So then my, one of my best friends who, Robert, he's also kind of psychic. And he's like, Susie, what are you doing here? Like there's going to be fires here. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, nah, what are you doing? I just moved in. This is paradise. I don't want to move. I hear the coyotes at night. There's a tarantula. I'm like having the best of both worlds. I'm in a city and it's beautiful. Like I feel like I'm in nature. So this is great. I found the balance. And then sure enough, that the night before, it was like the wind was like 50 miles an hour. It was super hot. And I was like, I'm suddenly getting a ping from God, and God's like, there's going to be a fire tomorrow. You know, I heard about the Paradise fires, and I was like, that's like way up north. There's not going to be fires. God's like, there's going to be, you know, just letting you know. And I'm like, thinking, all right, there's going to be take Charlie to work day. Yeah. Sure enough, like 8 a.m, you know, and what's even crazier is that I wanted to know where the escape routes were to my landlord. I wanted to, he put in carbon monoxide detectors and fire alarms that like to make sure that they were working, because I was certain that there was going to be a fire. At least I was going to protect myself, because I was like, nah, this is just like I'm just neurotic and whatever. Sure enough. So, yeah. And then sure enough, like that morning, and I was like, wow, right on time. What do you know? So I feel like when you get those pings and you don't listen, then of course chaos ensues. So Ed, what were those pings for you that, you know, you couldn't have foreseen, and it, you know, your life couldn't have magically worked out better, like in those moments?
I think I just moved towards things. So, for example, you know, playing volleyball in college, I didn't know, you know, my coach very well. I knew her for a very short period of time, and I made the choice to go there. Well, she ended up being a really pivotal person for me when I got opportunities, like when I was playing ball in college and then could work in New York and really as a job. Like I was looking to provide for myself. This wasn't like I dreamed to do this job. It was like, hey, this is a serious and interesting opportunity. So the way it showed up for me always, like in these businesses that we're doing, is just always leaning into the things that felt good, or that I knew. I may not know how to do it, but I feel like I could figure this out. Cause there's plenty of things I wouldn't be good at, so many. So it was always that. And also, I remember when I was very young, being in situations with the people who were taking care of me, the caregivers in my life, whoever they were at that time, and thinking, this seems too hard. I think I'm going to do this different. So there was also a lot of things that I understood about something that has shown up for me over and over, which is if you work 20% harder, 30% harder up front, you usually make it about 80% easier off the back. And I think I just remember seeing those things and feeling them and being like, you got to listen to that. You have to follow those things. So it was more in the ways of, when the instinct about a person showed up, I honored that, good or bad.
Yeah.
If an opportunity that, even if it didn't make a lot of sense, felt really interesting to me, and even if it's a little scary, I pursued it. And so it was, I think our instincts are connected to God, and they are one of our greatest gifts. Like even knowing about people that maybe you don't want to have around in your life.
Yeah.
Like we know. We just don't hear or listen sometimes. And I think I've always been hypervigilant that way.
It's been the bane of my existence of like.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've been in that way. I think I'm a genius.
Yeah.
But it's really was connected to, I'm joking. It was really connected to a level of hypervigilance.
Yeah.
That, however, what happens though, what's our signal? So what are my practices? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's still the signal I'm putting out. So that's really going to be the ultimate dictator of who I attract.
Yeah. We're the common denominator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always trying to keep my side of the street clean.
Always. Yep.
More so than like, who's that? Who's this? Because I have to do a lot less of that when I'm taking care of business.
Yeah. Something that I've realized in, shout out to, my new friend, John. He's the owner of the Islanders. And, but what was interesting, and also my best friend, we talk about this because I continue to go through so many lessons and learning just about like, you know, keeping your side of the street clean. And it doesn't matter what anyone else does, because it's, you know, these people, like, even if you feel like they've done wrong by you, or, you know, they're there to teach you something, you know, whether it's like, for me, it was like, standing up for myself, you know, and really choosing myself even more, I think. But it was interesting speaking to John, where it's like there was a guy who sort of like a Bernie Madoff character who like stole millions of dollars. Like he signed a contract basically that he was liable, like even if the company goes bankrupt, that he still has to pay millions of dollars, and entrusted his friend, and, you know, I guess didn't read the contract or whatever. And then this was like years later, and he's like, what the hell is this? But he didn't blame anyone, you know, even though that guy ended up going to jail. And, but I thought that was just a really cool way to look at things. It's like, you know, it's like, you know, what am I attracting into my life? And, you know, how can I learn from this? What is this there? Why is this person here to, like, they're there to teach you something? Or for me, it was like, in terms of like dating, it was sort of learning the same lesson over and over and over. So, you know,
well, and I'll add to that, because I totally agree. Sometimes we're in a practice and we're doing certain things and we think it's going good. And sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to give you a little squeeze and see if your work is actually
test. It's a test.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so like in your friend's case, for example, maybe he sort of has said, I'm not going to make money a priority, whatever I don't know, you know, and it's like, okay, here's a moment. Do you freak out? No, he doesn't, you know.
He doesn't.
And so I think when sometimes people come around, not only maybe we're attracting it, but it's also, it's like, oh, you say these are your values. You say this is how you're going to react. You say this is what you want to do. Here's your chance. And so those are opportunities also. My husband talks about this when somebody does something to him. He'll go, yes, and how is that working out for them? So,
oh no, the funny thing is you bring your patterns everywhere. So like, interestingly enough, is what I always find like is that, oh, you know, this person keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again. And you're like, you know, karma just takes care of it, where it's like they will either learn or they won't. And it you know, it doesn't matter. Like, I think one of my best friends, she's not even sure she even believes in justice. But I think in the sense of like not trying to force people to take responsibility because they have their own free will, you know, in place like we are a part of God, and God gives us free will to make that choice, like every single day, to make good choices, bad choices. And And then, probably on the life review, we have to like watch it all play out through everyone else's experiences. And it's people like who go through ayahuasca journeys. So I'm always constantly experiencing life as a life review, where it's like, even if, some lady did something like shitty to me where she was like trying to steal my seat and I was saving it for somebody else. And then we get into this fight and, and then we sort of yell at each other. I was in New York and then I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna have to see this on the life review. And I'm like, I could have handled this better. And she's like, because I was like, like she was so obnoxious and everyone was like, yeah, what the hell is her problem? Like, And then I thought to she's like, I can hear you, Sal. And I was like, I'm gonna have to hear this on the life review, or I'm gonna have to see it. So then I was like, listen, I could have handled that better. I didn't handle it better. You can have the seat. Look, my mom just died and, my friend just, committed suicide. I was just dealing with something. She's like, my friend just died too. Turns out we just ended up like having this beautiful moment of like a hug, went from like, the yelling at each other to like talking it out. So that was kind of cool if you approach life kind of like a life review of knowing that like I'm either going to have to deal with this now or I'm going to have to deal with it later,
Yeah. So true though.
It's so true.
And then those are those great opportunities where it's like, how's your training going?
How's your training going? You remind me of my friend Peekaboo. Do you know Peekaboo Street?
I've known Peekaboo I haven't seen Peekaboo in many years, but we were at Nike at the same time.
You guys seem very similar, just like badass, like awesome, like just, I feel like everything that comes your way, you are able to alchemize and just learn from it and just have a very similar values from what I can tell of knowing you for a total of...
Peekaboo is probably a lot more courageous than I am.
I don't know. I feel like...
I don't know. People who blaze down mountains going 70 on their two legs kind of amaze me. But I think it always made sense to her. So it's kind of like Laird. I was doing a commercial back in like 2015 and there was like a huge hurricane and this huge swell of like 30-foot waves, just like casually 30-foot waves. There's the dock, right in the Malibu Pier. And he's just So I'm doing this commercial where, this guy's supposed to propose to me and I'm like really going through it because I'm like, man, the boyfriend at the time just left for Burning Man without me. And I'm like, I don't know how that's going to turn out. And we ended up not lasting. It is exactly how it went. So here I am like, this guy I just met is like proposing to me for this like, diamond commercial or something. And there's Laird just doing 30-foot waves, just weaving through the dock between these poles like it's nothing. But he's like it's a duck to water. So it's the same thing with Peekaboo where it's like, it just makes sense to her. Yeah. Well, she's a courageous girl.
Yeah. And but I think you're pretty courageous. Where do you think you have courage in your life? And it might not be as like loud as say like weaving through docks. But I think like trusting your partner to, handle the house and to allow him to be himself. I think that's super courageous.
Yeah, I think the most courageous thing I do is what a lot of people do, which is I have, to the best of my ability, surrendered my children, my daughters, and even my own future to the unknown. I really, as much as I, am organized and very disciplined and all these things, there's a part of me that's allowing things just to happen because I know I'm kidding myself if I really think I can plan it out or force it or push it. And so for me, that and being really steadfast. I think that there's a part of me that no matter what, I'm really committed to being steadfast for the people in my life, because I feel like that's something I can offer them. I think we all have different things that we offer. And I think people mostly really know what they're going to get with me. And I can stand for them. That and, like I said, surrendering to the unknown, because it'd be so easy for me with my personality and my background to try to make everything happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I really learned through parenting, good luck with that.
I think Jordan Peterson says, I like a lot of, I loved his book. And, but basically he says, never interrupt your kids while they're skateboarding. So
they're learning to master something.
Yeah. And so like, it's dangerous. They're going to break some bones. And, I definitely, my mom was interesting because I was kind of like a latchkey, both me and my sister, she's a bit older, but we were latchkey kids. And so on the one hand, when I was in her company, she would helicopter the shit out of things, and try to control everything. And then when I wasn't there, out of sight, out of mind, she was like, just be living in, Chris Evert Tennis Academy as 12-year-old, just fending for myself for several years. So it's like, there wasn't a fully integrated like balance in that, And so I had to kind of, the art of letting go has been really, I think, like a huge thing in my life of, letting go of, there was like a whole situation and I literally had to be like, there was like just a huge, I don't want to get into it, but it was like, there was a loss of money and I just was like, well, I have to let it go. And then suddenly it all came back, but it's sort of this, I had to fully like embrace the unknown and fully let go, especially in relationships. It's like even in romantic ones where it's like, you have to fully surrender, let go. And, and I feel like that's the only way that, one of my best friends, Christy Bob's again, but she talks about, and she's similar to you where she does that really, really well, where she's like, the minute that if I try to control anything or it's dead already, it's like, it's literally the relationship will die. Like you have to allow, like, this is how she frames it, is we're all on this path of love. And it's sort of like you want to walk in the path. Ooh, I was trying to say divine and walk. So you want to walk in the path of the divine. And sometimes you get off those paths and then you have to like continue walking on the path of love. And sometimes like people will come in and out of your life. And if, maybe they start walking on the path of love and then it's like, it's too hard. It's too hard to be great. It's too hard to, it's like the instance with the woman that, was like, see this on the life review. Let me try to be better than this. Because sometimes you just want to flip the person off while you're driving or, and so I think that it's sort of like you just stay on the path and like you're both committed to that path of the shared value of walking that, divine path. And, I think you always allow people to come back on that path. Would you agree? Like that's where the art of letting go, that's kind of how I framed it for myself.
Yeah. Well, and also you never know. Right. Yeah. I will have been with Laird 29 years in a couple of days and married 27 years. And guess what? Every day I wake up and I go, I'll do my best today because you don't know, you don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about it, but you're going to show up and you'll deal with whatever it is that you're going to deal with or not. If most times there's nothing to deal with. It's all a lot of stuff, good stuff. Yeah,
it's like a lot of it is just existential dread and worry and anxiety that's like has nothing to do with walking the path of love. You're just, formulating, this can happen and this can happen. And sometimes you're like, like you can get
and
lost.
It's really natural. Yeah. So natural to do that. But, like Byron Katie talks about, past futuring. It's like, so if
past futuring, yes.
Yeah, it's like most of us and women are, as more prone to negative emotion. So it all makes sense.
Exactly.
That's why I like to be healthy physically So I can also consider my biology. So when I have impulses that show up, whether it be to shove too much of anything into my face or whether it's to worry about something that is unknown, a possible threat, it's to understand all of that is okay. All of that is natural. I have a choice in this moment. Do I have a practice maybe in place to help me get through it? And so a lot of times people don't consider biology, but once we get that relationship with it, it's also knowing these are all really natural things I'm doing. I just don't need to.
Yeah. Total different segue. You were on Billions. I love Billions. What was that experience like?
I love Billions too. I'm not much of a TV person. And I was sad because, Axe wasn't there in the season I was there. But it was great. They were lovely, super pro, amazing sets. Obviously, a really talented group, and a really wonderful day of shooting, and not much of a stretch. No, it was great.
And what was your character? What was the scene? What exactly happened? And did they just call you up, or were like, we need to hire Gabby for this? Is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, I was playing myself basically. And I've done that a few times, and hardest thing, right? And so they hired me to train the main character who was getting ready, for this whole metaphoric kind of race and competition. And so the funny thing was, is he comes, I'm supposed to be there and sort of wake him up and go like, we got to go. And he says, like, how cold is it or whatever. And the line that they gave me, it was pretty funny, was like, it's 0 fucks degree or something like that. Yeah. And so I said to the writers, I go, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you, as somebody who I've worked with a lot of athletes, I've trained a lot of people, and especially as a female, I go, when you're actually in charge, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You're not sarcastic. I mean, maybe later, like your coaches, whatever, and you go da da da. But
once you've built a real rapport with them, like they can, then
it's fun. I go, but you wouldn't do that. You would actually ignore it because you're in charge.
Yeah.
And so they were really nice about it. And they were like, well, what would you say? I just said, I would just say like, yeah, we're not doing that. Let's go. And that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they go, okay. I go, yeah. Because the minute I do that, I'm not the person who's administering the training that particular day, right? Like you learn about leadership, and leadership is, you never say I'm the leader. The only people who can say you're the leader is the people who say you're our leader. But what you can say is, okay, I have a program. I'm organized. Here's the parameters. Here's the time parameters. This is what we're doing. And I'll be accountable, whatever those things are. And so, it was really good fun, and it was so easy. And then we got to shoot also at Wall Street, which was gorgeous at night, and a blocked off street. And, it was really fun. And I have no interest in that space, because I always say you guys have to wait around more than any group I know. And people don't realize how hard that is and what you give up in your day-to-day life. Yeah. But to go for a day was awesome.
So now you do have, I've been kind of following XPT Life. Is that? Okay, that's correct.
XPT.
XPT. So walk me through these exercises, and how did this come about? Like how it's sort of like when I heard about how gunpowder was made, it was like just urine on the dirt or something. And it was like, how did they figure that out? So how the hell did you guys figure out just doing underwater resistance with the weights and holding your breath and all? I guess it makes sense for surfing, but what?
I think it makes sense for everybody. So I'd say about 17 years ago, we built this pool at my house, and it's a big pool, and it's a deep pool. And Laird and myself too, we don't love like swimming laps. And Laird was in his off season, so it's more summertime, so the water's warm. But it's like, how do I train for my sport, improve my, my lung capacity, my efficiency in the water, all these things. So it really started out as an experiment with about 4 other friends of ours. And this is the fun part about Laird. He is really playful and creative. And so we would do like these drills underwater, or then it's like, okay, put a weight vest on and tread till you can't. And I was like, well, this is stupid. And then it was actually my 5-year-old daughter, who's now 21, who swam a dumbbell from the deep end. She's a strong kid, athletic kid, probably like a 15-pound dumbbell from the 10-foot deep end. And she swam it up with one hand, swam. And then, kind of came up. And I saw Laird's face go, oh, wait, you could actually do reps. Yeah, you could do reps, because it's one thing for me to say, hold your breath and, train. You can only do that for so long.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, 30 seconds, if you're really working. Mm-hmm. But the idea of like reps and breaths in between and kind of turning this into a modular thing. So we developed it for a long time. There's probably over 30, 35 exercises. We work with a ton of athletes. Mm-hmm. The magical part of it is you're outside, you're in water. You are becoming more efficient with less air, which every athlete, every person needs. So hypoxic training. You can do ballistic training, very hard and explosive training, but land like a feather. So you're not crushing your joints, and you're in compression. So you're also circulating your lymphatic system at some other level compared to being out here. So you're never sore. You meet yourself in a real way, right? So people can say, okay, well, notice your thoughts. Well, the cool thing about the pool is if I react in any way, even if my jaw is clenched too tight or I'm gripping my dumbbell too hard, that move alone burns air. It's inefficient.
Wow.
So what you learn is if we go, hey, we're going to do this drill and we're going to go 4 times there and back, no breath. The only way to do that on some level is to manage your discomfort. And not to be like, oh shit, I'm out of air. And oh my God, that's air. Wow. It's to be like, okay, I notice this is getting hard, or I'm not my best today, or I feel uncomfortable. But like in meditation where they say to allow the thought to go through, which is very hard to do, there the water objectively has taught you, if you react in a real way, you're going to burn air. And you can't afford air. So it's really an efficiency. It's a getting to know oneself. It's ballistic movement. It's hypoxic training. If you're recovering from an injury, it's a really safe environment. And then another very dear friend of mine that I've been friends with for 30 years that played volleyball also was like, you should really share this with other people. So it got systematized. Laird's always done the breathing. And then, we added heat and ice in about 15 years ago.
That's right. So it just Laird with the 200, what was it? Like, it's like 200 degrees with the oven mitts.
With the bike.
With the bike.
That was just stupid. That was boys being like, how about this? But we do a bike in about 160 in the sauna. So
was he doing 200 with the oven mitts?
50, no, that one you don't need oven mitts. It was when it got to like 200, 220, not to mention that was with a bike that had a fan in the front. So like an assault bike. So now you're whipping yourself with the hot air. So that was just really, that whole thing was really stupid.
How long did that last for?
They bring that out every once in a while when they're feeling extra spicy, but you had to wear the mitts because everything was getting burned. It was crazy. But the biking at 160 for 15 is quite good because let's say you're short on time. Yeah. You just get a lot done quickly. You have to deal with so a lot of athletes, what happens to athletes, why they lose coordination or there's problems is because they overheat. So the idea of kind of stressing yourself in a hot environment and being able to adapt to that and get better at it. Also, the idea behind it would be, hey, the organism's more efficient. So I can still make decisions better. My body knows how to cool itself off. There's just a couple things. So when you get to sort of my time in life, I'm not competing, obviously. But when you've trained this long, it's like,
but you're still in incredible shape, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in good shape. But the point is that there's a hierarchical kind of level where you start to go, yes, but is my training making me a better person? Because there can be training for stronger, harder, faster, higher. Sure. That's great. But now can we also train? Can we train forever? Can we train forever really hard? And can we do things that actually make us better in life?
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because it's, with my best friends, we're constantly like, allowing the thoughts to move through us, or the grief, like dealing with the loss of my mom and my friend is, allowing the grief to move through you and cry it out. So great thing about being in New York City is the amount of times you could just cry on the street. And, it's one of the best places to experience grief because it's kind of, it feels very counterintuitive to New York, but New Yorkers are incredibly empathic. And, the amount of times that I would just be crying and people would be like, are you okay? And then just hug me, or they would just be like, here, drinks on us. Or it would be like, here's free food. It's a $60 meal. Hey, it's fine. Like your neighbors would just take care of you. Like it was such a wild experience. So it's like, also they're just like, yeah, I've been there crying on the street. Yeah, I get it.
It's true.
But I think, it's always, like you were saying, it's sitting alone with your thoughts, especially as an athlete. It's like, you can, it like being especially like in a dangerous sport, it forces you to be fully present about like skiing, for instance, if you're going really fast, it just forces you to be fully there. But, also I do think where I feel like a lot of athletes where it's like they don't deal with all this anxiety and mental stress. And Marty Fish, when he was having anxiety attacks, and we talked about it on the podcast, but it's sort of like you compartmentalize this to be like this warrior, but then you don't deal with this other part of yourself, And so I feel like there has been just more of an awakening of just, integrating like, well, I am a feeling, human being who's experiencing grief, or I'm experiencing anxiety, and, having to sit with yourself and just be with that, be with the fears and be like, where does this come from, and to understand it. And like, for instance, I recently had this thing, I had this money issue happen, and it's all resolved now. But there was a moment where it showed me my dad's trauma of when he was in war, and being like a child of war, and being homeless, and not knowing where he's, going to have shelter or food. And so I would always have this like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless. Like, just like I'm worried. And so when this really hard thing that like leveled me for a second, and then I had to confront that. I had to be like, oh my God, I'm going to be 42 and alone and on the street. And, I was like, where is that coming from? And was like, oh my God, this is my dad's trauma. Like I'm finally fully expressing that he never got to fully, like, it's like, hey Dad, I see you, and this no longer serves me. And this is not like I can, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'm not going to take this on anymore, And so I think like
getting rid of some of that ancestral trauma is pretty great, because I think it's really confusing.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting when you're having these, the exercises that you do for XPT life, that like you are not only like, it's kind of like martial arts. It's the same sort of thing where, you're having to confront yourself, and it's, I mean, I find that to be just so beautiful. We have to wrap this up. I'm getting a look from Ari real quick, but my last question, how do you continue like having almost like 30 years of a successful marriage? How do you, keep your sex life like new and exciting? And because, I feel like at a certain point, a lot of couples, they just become roommates, or the sex isn't as important. So how, like you're two athletes, so I imagine there's still a lot of sex to be had. So how do you keep it fresh?
Well, listen, you probably don't keep it new, but sex in itself is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So I would say that having sex and making sex a priority.
Yeah.
And also not having one person always be the pursuer, which sometimes is usually the male, because then it creates a weird shift where she feels pressure and he feels like and that's not a really attractive dynamic. So I learned that early in my marriage, which would be to make the invitation to Laird versus, him always kind of being the one to remind me, if you will.
Yeah.
And also like, it isn't sexy, but scheduling it, especially when you have a family.
I literally heard this. I heard this from my friend. She literally said the same thing with kids and everything in life and jobs. And you have to schedule it.
Sometimes my husband, he'll be like, sometimes I just feel like it's at the same time. I go, it's either schedule it or don't have it. So it feels like scheduling. Once you get there and you get into it, nobody cares. So I know that is not sexy, and everybody watches movies and it's like, do you feel like it? We fling on the table and here we are. Well, that's not really happening, especially if you have little people walking around or, any place to be.
Yeah.
So I would say have it. And I know this is, weird, but sometimes we really take our partners for granted and we forget what's special about them. And so I always use this trick, and it's not always, but I've used this trick in the past, which is like, is there someone else who'd be like to be sleeping with my husband?
I've had friends who do that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, he's pretty great, like, oh wait, so I know it's
you'll
twisted,
role play.
But and it's just like getting a little bit of space and being like, I like them. I'm attracted to them. And, but yeah, listen, is it the same as like a first kiss? It isn't, but it can be really great. And I do think it's like priming the pump. I do think the more you can sort of do it, it's part of your life, and people are enjoying it, and you have that type of, you have that language living enough between you as a couple, that has a lot of downstream benefits.
Yeah.
But everybody has to do it the way, like,
you make your own rules.
And I've heard people say, some people just want to be held. I'm actually not that, I'd rather get to business and like, okay, cuddle, whatever. Like, I don't care about that. Other people want to do that. So whatever the languages are, kind of meet each other, but you got to have it. You got to like have sex. If that's important to both partners. Right. If you come to another agreement, then make sure that just the agreements are the same. Part of when everybody goes, oh, gratitude and be present, part of that is being able to every single day appreciate the people that are the closest to you, including snotty teenagers, is really looking at these people and saying, I'm really so fortunate to be surrounded by these people, and I'm going to act in a way that they know that without me saying it.
That's amazing. That's a perfect place to end. Gabby, thank you so much for your time. And I knew this conversation would be awesome and incredible. And I feel like my last quick question, do you feel like the podcasting, I feel like for my life, it has completely made my life better because you're having, intimate conversations, and, you're being challenged, and you're getting to know just somebody's life's journey. And have you found that it's just, made you, at least for me, it's changed my life in a myriad of ways and for the better. And has that been the same experience for you?
Yeah, I think anytime you can, well, first it's forced learning, right? I for one, and also just, getting the opportunity to see another person's perspective, I think is really good. Totally.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast. Great ones.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Hi, guys. If you like this episode, please comment, like, and subscribe so we can get on that algorithm and you can see more of our latest episodes.
A whole nother level.